On our trip to the Azores Islands, we have seen some findings that do not fit into the official history. And although official academics are aware of their existence, they look the other way. It seems they have no intention of conducting a serious and in-depth investigation. The megalithic formations that abound on the island are not an accidental product of nature, nor were they created by the Portuguese. Everything indicates that they are the work of a single civilization whose remains bear a great similarity to others found in Europe and the Mediterranean. But if this weren't enough, there is still another rather disconcerting element. They have found the grooves left on the rocky terrain by some type of vehicle used by this unknown civilization. We have already mentioned and analyzed in other videos the cart ruts or cart tracks, which appear in Minorca, Sicily, or Sardinia, and even in other parts of the world. And in all these places, there is also evidence that there was a megalithic civilization that mastered the use of stone. On these Mediterranean islands, some furrows are connected to temples or sites of archaeological interest. Although currently, most of them have practically disappeared, being buried by vegetation and soil. But, without a doubt, one of the best places where these types of marks can be seen is in the Maltese archipelago. Specifically on the islands of Malta and Gozo, which are full of grooves. In fact, more than 200 tracks have been counted, which appear to be ancient roads or paths where some type of vehicle or transport used to pass. The official theory considers that these tracks arise as a consequence of the rubbing of ancient carts pulled by mules or other draft animals, which wear down the rocky pavement. But if it were so, how much time has to pass and how many times do the carts have to pass for the wear on the rock to be so deep? And why don't we find the footprints of the animals that pull the cart? There are countless questions that official archaeology cannot explain, such as, why are there grooves that end abruptly on the coasts and even extend under the sea, continuing along the seabed, as we can see in St. George's Bay in Berzebuga? Or why do these footprints leave Malta, going under the sea until they reach the small island of Fifla? This could indicate that the grooves were made in a distant past, when the sea had not yet covered the territory extending between the island of Malta and Fifla. Therefore, the history as we have been told does not fit. The beast paths, as they call the cart ruts in the Azores, are present on all the islands of the archipelago. One of the official explanations attributes its origin to the Portuguese settlement of the islands in the 15th century, while another claims that its formation must have taken place during the 17th and 18th centuries. As a consequence, the traces of the Azores have largely been marginalized and forgotten by archaeology and geology, which is why serious scientific research has never been conducted. In fact, the first furrows of the Azores were rediscovered on the island of Corvo and reported in 2017 by a local newspaper. Previously, they had gone completely unnoticed, something truly inexplicable. And, just like in other parts of the world, in the Azores there are also furrows that run several hundred meters in various directions, with some paths merging with forks, abrupt endings, and so on. Most of them are not visible because the different elements of nature, along with time, have taken care of hiding them. It was Francisco Ferreira Drummond in the 19th century who made a written mention of them, questioning that if they were used for wood extraction, they could not have been made in the 17th or 18th centuries, because there was wood near the Portuguese settlements. Therefore, it was unnecessary to travel distances of 20 kilometers, and he suggests that they must have been made at least around the year 1500. He adds that, in some excavations, remains of older constructions were found, along with other discoveries that caused quite a bit of astonishment. leading to the possibility that the island might have been inhabited by another civilization in very remote times. However, there is another question that seems familiar to us because we have already seen it in Malta and in other Mediterranean islands, and which, curiously, is repeated in the Azores. The depth and size of the cuts do not follow any pattern. The cavities of some grooves are U-shaped, others, however, are V-shaped or even W-shaped, although some of those that are U-shaped, strangely, have walls that are practically rectangular. And just as we saw on the island of Malta, in the village of Porto Martins, located to the east of Terceira Island, the grooves lead to the edge of the island and continue under the sea. Some have suggested that they could be the tracks of the boats that were launched into the sea. But then why do furrows appear all over the interior of the island? Did they perhaps use the boat to move across land as well, in all directions without any defined pattern? Once again, we are faced with the mystery of what type of vehicle could have left such deep tracks in different parts of the world. On Terceira Island, efforts have been made to clear the furrows for in-depth study, as most are completely hidden by vegetation and soil, even buried under hardened lava formed by eruptions from different periods. So far, about 300 meters of grooves have been cleaned, with the deepest sinking into the rock almost 1/2 meter, and the shallowest 3 centimeters, a great inequality. The width of the tracks is not uniform and varies from 1.1 to 1.4 meters. The analysis by Professor and physicist Felix Rodriguez of the data collected from the research conducted on the grooves of Terceira suggests that these marks are at least 3,000 years old. Therefore, they would not have been made by the Portuguese or the Romans, but by an earlier civilization. They could even be older than Rodriguez estimates, as some researchers argue that the grooves were formed when the ground was soft, like mud, and as vehicles or carts passed, they left their marks on a fresh mass, which over time hardened into the solid rock we see today. And, as if that weren't enough, there are geologists who claim that millions of years must pass for the soft soil, which these vehicles traversed, to harden into rock. Anyway, since it is difficult to determine which theory is the most accurate, we will continue to be unaware of how these grooves were made, so for now, they will remain a mystery. And what do you all think?